Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Climb, presented by the Digital Mastermind. The Digital Mastermind is a collection of marketing professionals, digital agencies, technologists that come together to collaborate and solve each other's problems. We meet periodically, about bi-weekly, at least in Zoom calls. We get together once a year. That was postponed. But if you want to meet other like-minded individuals in your space, some of the top agencies in the country, go ahead and shoot me an email, john@digitalmastermind.com, or visit us online, digitalmastermind.com. Or if you're watching this, throw a comment in throw a comment in one of the sections there, and go ahead and try to stump us. I'd love a difficult question, and go ahead and like, share, and rate this show wherever you are. Today, we're going to be talking about account managers versus project managers, essentially what those roles and what those traits are. And I want to go ahead and bring out my good friend and co-host here, Dave. Dave, why don't you come out here? Hey. So today's subject is something you and I definitely talk a lot about, right?
Yes.
Those primary roles and functions are integral to any agency and most companies, for that matter, especially on the service side, being successful. Which would you say you gravitated more toward earlier in your career? Would you say you were more on the account management side or the project management side, as it was, per your own personality?
I would say earlier in my career, project management, because I didn't really quite understand what account management did earlier in my career, and it was more of I guess it was farther away from me being a developer, so I was more interacting with the project manager, so I understood that more. But as we'll discover throughout this conversation, like the longer I went, the more I thought account management was far more important.
Yeah, interesting. I think project management for me was more of a necessity. I remember the first project manager I met, the project that we worked on, he had no idea. It was just all this individual did was, all right, is that complete? No? Okay, when's that going to be complete? And then timelines would get moved.
It's like a taskmaster. I mean, that's
totally. Yeah. I had a super educated this individual had all types of accolades. So I had a very skewed vision of what a project manager was from the start. And first account manager I met that was completely on the other side. Right. Super professional, and just everything that I'm going to get into today, which I have done both of those roles, which helps both sides of the company, right? So it helps the internal as well as on the client side. I think that makes a solid account manager, which we'll get into. So to kind of kick things off, I think let's go ahead and just define these, right? And let me know what your thoughts are. I think account managers essentially protect the relationship with the client. They maintain the account, and they're responsible for upsells. So there's a sales component there, right?
Absolutely.
And on the project management side, that's the project manager protects the production team and delivers the project on time within budget. So if you had to say all right, these are the functions that we're going to hire these individuals for, it's like account manager protects the relationship with the client, maintains the account, and then upsells the account when necessary. The project manager protects the production team and delivers the project on time within budget. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much the balance of, I like to describe it as the account manager needs to be the client advocate, and the project manager needs to be the internal team advocate.
Yep.
And they both come together, and that makes a successful project.
Yep. I used to say the A-frame, right? So it's okay. So they're both leaning in on each other. So you have the account manager that's leaning, and then the project manager, and that creates a solid structure as far as a roof is concerned. So all right, let's go ahead and get into what some of these traits for an account manager. Now, I think the first and foremost part of being an account manager is who they serve, right? And this is a very difficult job. The account manager literally has to serve everyone, every stakeholder that is involved. So that's going to be on the client side. That's going to be on ownership. That's going to be everybody that's on the project management team. They're literally in the middle of this entire relationship, and some of that's shared on the project management side, but they have to make sure that everyone's happy.
Well, they have to impact everything simply because the buck stops with them, right? The client is coming to them no matter what. So no matter who fails in whatever issue arises behind the scenes, ultimately comes down to the account manager has to deal with it.
Yep.
So they better be proactive and check with design and make sure the designs are getting done. Make sure the development's on schedule. They should selfishly get themselves involved in all the pieces. And the account managers that say, well, that's not my responsibility, that's a bad account manager.
I agree. The account manager should want the ball at all times and be willing to assist everybody on that project. That's the only way that everybody can be happy. You can't make people happy, be like, oh, that's not my job. Oh, right. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Oh, no, I got to leave here in 10 minutes. So no, good luck with that. That's weak account management. Yeah.
And if you lose the account because you were, needed to go, run an errand or whatever, then you lose the account.
Yep. So, yeah, I agree. And people are unhappy, right? So I think that's I'd say first and foremost, they have to understand that they have to keep everybody happy in that deal and be willing to go the distance to make that happen, right?
And I always say add value. You have to add value in the process.
That's a great point.
And you don't want to just be a mail forwarder. If you're just getting and pushing, and you're not adding value to the process, then you're not needed. And
I need to go through every employee, though, right? Every employee should be continually trying to add value in every touch point. But first and foremost, definitely an account manager, because it's easy for somebody. I got a call once where somebody was like, I don't want this guy working on my account. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just don't. I think he was a hard worker, but the client never saw the value of the work that he was doing.
Sure.
Which I think brings up our next point is communication, right? You want that with anybody that you're going to work with, right? Absolutely. But they need to know what to say, when to say it and how to say it. So you can't have sloppy emails where it doesn't make sense, right? And I'm not talking about grammar. That goes without saying, right? Or if you're charming enough, maybe you can get away with that part. But if you send confusing emails externally or internally, that's a problem, because now you're wasting people's time. Now you're getting into the efficiencies. And then it's hard enough to get information from clients as it is, because they're busy. They're doing what they do. They hired, your company to specifically do something. So you have to continually condition them and make it as easy as possible for them to deliver that information. So being a solid communicator is a big deal.
Yeah, if your communication sucks, then you're going to be causing frustrations. And then if the client's getting frustrated, nobody wants to work on that project. Things break down. And then we have to do one of those infamous, all right, let's do a reset meeting. Let's bring all the people together and say, all right, how do we fix this? And then we got to bring processes in place to make sure that shitty communication doesn't happen. So the way I always train an account manager is make sure your email has everything in it that the person reading it needs to give you a yes or no answer. So or as easy as possible to say, I'll pick that option. So one thing I hate that I see is like they'll explain one route and say, oh, but this will be really difficult or expensive. But then you don't talk about, well, what's the alternative? Or flesh out the idea so much that you can just say, yeah, I want option one. You want to try to minimize the number of emails back and forth to a yes or no or instant. And if you don't provide any information and somebody instantly has to reply with, well, what client or what website or what
I'm
thing,
confused,
right? Then you're just wasting time, and it's like gears grinding, trying to get into the next gear. So
I think that's a good way to put it. The gears grinding, because the cost isn't just the time, it's the energy, right? So time is one thing. I don't have a problem working 14, 16 hours if I have to, but if I'm exhausted working 14 or 16 hours, work sucks.
Yep.
So when somebody doesn't put that thought into that communication, and we now have to volley back and forth in emails, that's just going to zap my energy, and it's going to become frustrating. I don't mind phone calls either. So if we need to do this in a phone call, cool. Let's go ahead and tee that up. We can schedule a meeting, but that would also denote being a good communicator to know that.
Right. And I think so. When you said earlier, when you started off with, you had like 3 points for communication. I just call that tact. It's not just what you're saying, it's how you say it and how you position the message so that it's acceptable as possible. And so that's why you have to have, being an account manager is hard, and you need to have understanding of what you're, selling, or so that you're not just copy and pasting. Because when you just copy and paste, then like a developer, a technical asset is going to say something that's probably too high level for a customer. And then the customer is going to be like, what do you mean by this? And then again, that's another email that has to go back and forth.
Which is a great point when you're an early account manager, especially when you're working with technical. And maybe this isn't so much anymore. I know early in my career, I was looking at emails like, are you kidding me? Like, no one is. And it would sometimes take 20 minutes to rewrite somebody's email that I had to send to a client because it made absolutely no sense. Yeah. And if you forward that to the client, it's just, dude, I hired you guys not to, bore the hell out of me. I don't even know what the hell that means. Thanks for insulting me.
One of my tips I always give account managers is use bullet points. Today, this goes into a bigger point, but today's communication is about quick, easy, digestible pieces of information. I call it the Twitterification of our society. And if you write me a story, 3-paragraph email that reads like a book, people are just gonna be like, too long, didn't read. So it needs to be in bullet points. It needs to be broken out in an easy, digestible, bite-sized thing so you can make quick decisions on it. Like read, boom. All right, let's go forward, or something like that. So it's the construction of the message is very important if you want somebody to read it.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it too, is creating the yes or no scenarios make it very easy for somebody to respond. Hell, it's almost, I don't know, maybe Google should just put like a little survey in there that you could get your information in, via Gmail. All right, so point number 3 is the ability to see the whole picture. So I've seen weak account managers or new account managers where it's as if they don't understand where they're at with the account, or where we are at with the relationship, or with the work that's being done. And that is just, that's one, a frustrating position for them to be in, right? 2, it's not being the quarterback necessary. And there's kind of 2 quarterbacks in this, right? Because the account manager and the project manager, but they need to be able to work together. But when they don't understand the vision, that means the budgets are going to go haywire, right? Because you're not going to know what the cost perspective should be. As far as the timelines, that's not going to be fair for the production side, because you're not going to know what that expectation is. And expectation is a huge part of what an account manager is supposed to do: continually set those internally and externally. And if that is going to happen, the inability to see that whole picture, how are you going to grow that account? You're going to lose it. So at all times, you need to know where you're at with the account and where that account is going.
Without vision, you don't know, you need to understand the client's goals. What's their ultimate goal? And if you don't understand that and keep that in mind with everything you do and interact with, then you're not driving towards that goal, and you're not going to produce amazing results. You're not going to get your team, because the account manager really is like the spearhead of the team, and your team is the tool in order to impact your client. And if you don't have that vision and that goal in mind with everything you do, you're not going to make an impact for that client. And while you might be able to maintain that client for a long time with that, and some clients honestly just want you to do that, but you're not going to grow it. And an account manager's job is to grow the account. You don't want to just maintain the same level for 5 years. I mean, it happens.
It's an order taker.
Right, exactly. That's more of like a taskmaster.
Yep.
So, in order to grow the account, you have to understand their goals, understand their long-term vision, and then have an idea of how to get there. You don't have to know how to build the mobile app or how to build an online dashboard, but you know that they need a dashboard to get to their goals. That's where the account manager has to be has to have that vision. So
and anticipating ahead. There's the what is it, client service? I can't remember or brain surgery for. No, it's like Brain Surgery for Suits. It was a book that was written. I read it years ago. Anyway, you have to continually produce the insights based on the value point, right? You want to continually show value, but the account manager, knowing where they're at with the account, you got to be able to see what's around that corner. So it's like, okay, if we're here, this is, what is potential in the future that, you also get. These are your rewards. These are your fruit from this marketing campaign or building that app, building that dashboard. And also going to every meeting and bringing a gift. And that gift is like an idea or something that continually propels that account forward. That is another trait that goes into that ability to see the whole picture.
Right. And it's key for an account manager to borrow from other things. Like you might have a project over here that is working on this new charting system for, data analytics. Mm-hmm. And if you know that this other client over here could benefit from that, like that's what you bring. You borrow from the other clients to be like, look, I'm working on this other account. It's really making an impact. It's allowing their employees to be able to do X, Y, Z much faster. I highly recommend we think about adding that, something like that. And then the client's like, this is great. This is why you hire external teams, because they can borrow from other experiences to make you better. An internal team doesn't do that.
Right. Yeah. So you have to fight really hard for an internal team to do that. It's just
right.
It's not as organic, right? So there's a cost associated to that. But yeah, I think absolutely. Anytime you have external teams, if you can pull from their insights, that's always going to lend perspective for better products and better processes.
Right.
And then speaking to that account manager, that whole picture, I think one of the next big traits is push. And it's one of the, and it's using the 3 Ps, something I've been saying for a long time, positive, persistent pressure. If you can push the client into that uncomfortable growth zone, that is a place that's going to be mutually beneficial. Not to the point that they're, losing sleep or crying, but if you can, comfortably push them to, all right, this is going to be something that's, a faster website or a redesign or, a rebranding, or that app that is going to create the efficiencies internally that maybe some people aren't going to adopt because they've been working there for 30 years. That ability is something that not only gets the best work from a company to be able to deliver, so gets the best results. And pushing also is internal. You're going to push your internal team as well. But I think there's a delicate way of doing it, and it's integral.
And that's how an account manager grows an account, because you have to push them to do some new things, and they're going to be like, I don't know, I've been thinking about a website for a rebrand. No, you got to push them and show them how they're going to grow with it, and then get the upsell. So you got to be able to push them into new things and pitch them new things, and constantly engage them on like, how do we grow their business? Because that's ultimately, if we can grow their business with marketing, with technology, then they're going to buy more technology. And I would just say, it's ask them a question like, what is something that somebody's spending way too much time on? Like, what's a challenge, a process that feels tedious?
Who do you want to get rid of in here?
Right. Who's complaining the most about their job? And then
yeah, exactly. And along those lines, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you want to create efficiencies, especially with what we do, we say it's like labor units, right? It's like, where are you spending entirely too many labor units? And they're like, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get rid of a job. It's just making it that much more efficient.
Sure. So our favorite account manager just messaged in with a question. The Beth says, should an account manager be readily available at all times after business hours? If they are the client's peace of mind, do they need to be responsive evening and weekends as well as to soothe any issues as needed?
So I think that's a great question. Yeah. And I think that depends on the dynamic of the relationship and what the expectations are, right? So one of our previous episodes, we talked about sharing with the client that we are a business and we have work-life balance, and we need to be able to take time off to rest and recover. I think if that's the expectation. Now, if the expectation is where it's going to be 24 hours and they're paying for that type of service, I hope that we're making a ton of money in doing that, but then we would be able to deliver. But I think at the end of the day, it's just setting the expectation, saying like, hey, I take weekends off so I can be able to deliver your best work, the 5 days a week. If that's the way that you choose to manage your accounts. Me personally, unfortunately, I've been available and a lot of unfortunately available, but I built such close relationships with clients where that's just the way that I manage my accounts. So I think it just really depends on you as the person and the way that you go about the accounts that you manage.
So I completely disagree with you. What we're talking about from my perspective is the exception, not the rule. Now, if a client is hitting you up at 9 o'clock every single night, completely agree that you need to have boundaries. But if we're talking about a client needs you or there's an issue at once every 3 months on a weekend, your ass better respond to them. Their business is the most important thing in their life. Mm-hmm. And if something goes down, if their website's down or they can't take orders or their business is broken and they need you and you're not there, I'm finding another company.
Is that an emergency we're talking about, or just availability? All right. Well, I mean, okay. All right. That's a bit of a broad brush. If it's an emergency and an account manager doesn't handle that, that's a piece of shit account manager, right?
Correct.
Okay.
100%.
All right. That's a completely different thing. What I'm talking about is the day-to-day where
they should not be available day-to-day.
Right. That's where I disagree. I think that is a personality based on the way that you manage your accounts. Now, the one that is and builds the stronger relationship with that account manager that is willing to take the call at 9 o'clock or 7, that you're going to have an account for life, because why would that client think they're going to get anything better if production's delivering at the rate that they are and they're getting the service from you? They wouldn't. That's ridiculous.
Well, that's like almost turning a client into a friend. I mean, I've got clients that are on that level.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. I think if you can do that and you genuinely enjoy working with them, you have a client for life, like you said. That's the ideal. But the way I read best questions is anytime that first of all, for me and for everyone here at Oyoi, I do not want you working at night. I do not want you working on the weekends.
Recovery time.
Refresh. Yep. If they're needed, so we work really hard to ensure that you don't need to be working overtime or call emergency stuff. So that's the baseline. And so if it's needed after hours, to me, that's going to be the rare occurrence of an emergency. And I think you have to be available.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think those are emergency circumstances, though. But I think in the day-to-day account management, I think that's just depending on what boundaries that you want to set.
I also do believe that you have a much more laxed response time on after hours. The expectation should be a little bit more elastic when it comes to because things do happen. I mean, like, I've woken up to text messages at 3 o'clock in the morning, like my site's down, and I didn't get back to them because guess what? I was sleeping.
Right.
So that has to just be okay. But I better at least respond to them when I wake up and check and say, oh, okay, they have an issue. I need to get on this.
Yeah,
so
that's all you got to do too, is just say on it or whatnot. Working on this right away. If somebody doesn't understand why you were sleeping at 3 a.m., I think, okay, well, there's some psychological issues in the individual that we're working with.
I mean, back in the day when I worked at Adelphia, I remember getting pulled out of a bar by my boss physically at like 11:30 midnight. I already got a nice buzz on, and I had to go into the office to work on something because something broke, and it was in production. And then I was fine. I did it. I didn't want to disappoint my bosses or anything like that. Today's workforce, you cannot get them to do anything outside of business hours. Like, it's crazy how work-life balance, and that's it. And there's this hard line. Well, there is no such thing as a hard line in business. And if you're not flexible, then the people that are going to leapfrog you every single time.
Well, no, and I think that's you touched on it. That's a mental construct, right? And if you believe that is the reality of the type of companies that you're working with, well, you're wrong. Right. Somebody's going to do it, better, faster, cheaper. So right. Always offer the absolute best possible service you can. What I find interesting, though, is were you drinking with your boss, or did he drive to a separate location where he knew where you would be, which is also interesting?
Well, so Adelphia's headquarters is in this tiny little town of Coudersport, Pennsylvania, where the population is literally 500 people.
Oh.
So when I said, he dragged me out of the bar. I meant the only bar in the town. So it was pretty easy
Not
to
a
figure
bar,
out
the
why.
bar.
Yeah.
Got
There was actually 2 bars, and he knew I always preferred the one. So
Got it.
but yeah, I just think it comes down to hunger, right? The person that's going to go over and above for their client, no matter what, is going to win every single time. And again, that I think I touched on this last episode. It's like, who's got my back? If I'm a business owner and I'm hiring an agency, I need to know and feel that they've got my back. And if in an emergency I don't feel they've got my back, I don't think I've got the right agency.
Well, it has to be they've got your back in every situation, right?
Right.
To the point where like, no, we're not good at that, but we can link you up with somebody else. Not, no, we're not good at that. Find somebody else. Like, no. That's not good client relations. Every single possible way you need to offer service.
Yep. And even when we're wrong, as like if we screwed up, I've got the client's back. I'm going to understand that, yeah, we screwed up. I'm going to discount you some hours. I'm going to work with you to get this stuff fixed. We're not going to charge you. Like that, even in a mistake, you're telling the client, I've got your back.
Yep, absolutely. And I think to that client service brings up the next point, which is willing to roll up your sleeves. As an account manager, you need to be able to fill the gaps when you can. And those gaps can be depending on your skill set, right? So if you had copywriting experience before, being able to write copy, design experience, helping out with the design, but the rolling up your sleeves, and getting down and dirty with it is providing the production team as much as you possibly can so they can deliver on their work, right?
Yeah.
So find out every nuance possible so you can put those things together and they can do what they do.
So I'm sure there's people watching this right now going, wow, the account manager has to do everything. That's crazy. Well, I always kind of look at it like the show Mad Men. You've seen that, right? Mm-hmm. And the account manager guy in that show represents it perfectly. But he's also looked at as top leadership. Really good account managers aren't just a person. They're, part of that, almost the leadership group for that client. And I think that's, a big component of what, people need to understand is that an account manager isn't just somebody that makes sure the client gets what they need. That's like the lowest level. The high end,
that's an order taker.
Level, yeah. But that enterprise level account manager is that leadership level. So they're providing ideas. They're, just like you said, getting the details that the production team needs so that they can succeed. A high end account manager knows how to detail those out. Not just, say, hey guys, they need something, and then let the production team figure that out. Like, that's wasting their time, and then we're not getting billable hours out of that. So,
and I think to the Mad Men point back then, due to all of the entertaining they had with the smoking, the drinking, and the speed essentially you had to take to live, with 2 hour a night sleeping habits, their life expectancy, I want to say, was in the low 50s. Like, yeah, it was insane back then. Yeah.
They also had Quaaludes though, so
yeah,
you can relax after.
I know. Never had one. Never had a Quaalude. I worked with these guys though that lived through the 60s and 70s. Dude, they talked about those things like they were miracle makers. Like, oh man, Quaaludes. God, I wish we still.
I mean, what was that? Leave It to Lucy, or what's the Desi Arnaz?
I Love Lucy.
I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about them all the time in that show. So.
Do they really talk about Quaaludes?
Yeah.
That's where I huge I Love Lucy fan.
That's where I found out about him.
Really? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He always used to say, he used to scream to her, like, take another Quaalude.
Really?
I'll send you some YouTube clips.
Yeah, send me some. Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't wear that. Which brings up our next point, talking about entertaining, being flexible, agile, and providing out of the box thinking. I don't like the term out of the box thinking, but it is what it is based on our show preppers today. But I think with that, let's say that you have processes, right? You can't get married to your processes on the client side. If they're unwilling to do it, you want to keep that account. You as the account manager have to conform to make it easier on them, right? So there might be some trade-offs with your internal teams, but just knowing that, like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to have to go and figure out a better way to do this. Also, when something is handed over, let's say that, all right, this is our this is our marketing plan. Well, you have to dig in and figure out how you can make sure that that is going to work, of course, for them as well as yourself. So you can't just say, all right, this is conventional and I'm just going to, set it and forget it. You continually have to push, as I mentioned before, but also provide that out of the box thinking as an account manager.
So the account manager is the bridge, right? And if your team has certain processes and the client has certain processes and the client needs it done in that way, then you have to be the conversion between your team and the client and make it work for them. So if your team is using teamwork project management and the client's using Basecamp, you might have to post updates to their Basecamp for them and to keep the teams communicating. I mean, that's just part of it. So they have to be flexible. They have to be able to fit the client's need.
Yep. And think differently, because you have your own culture and your own company's thinking, but also you have to think as if you're one of them, and you have to then relay that information to your team, saying like, this isn't going to work because whatever peculiarities may exist there. Which tees up the next point, the relationship building, right? A lot of people would start with this, but I think that's kind of a given, and I think it does deserve some credit here. So the relationship building is, of course, integrity, right? Accountability, delivering on what you said you were going to do, and make sure that you're doing it to a way that works for the client as well as for yourself. But you also have to be a pleasant person. There's people that may look like a serial killer when they're on a Zoom call, or they stuck their finger in a light socket and they're hating on some people. I think the being that pleasant person, someone that people want to, be with, whether that's speaking with, or be around, is very important. It makes the relationship a much better situation. And of course, like I said, delivering on what you said you were going to do and promise, being attentive, taking the emergency calls on the weekend, all of those things that form that relationship. So if you're good with relationships, it makes account management a lot easier.
I mean, I think if you're not good with relationships, you can't be an account manager.
I have seen some that I'm like, are you out of your fucking mind? Like, how is that person an account manager? I've seen salespeople that would never ask a question, would never shut up in a conversation where I witnessed them selling something, and they still sell some things. So these, they're not unicorns. I don't know. Demons exist to some extent. So I think if you want a healthier company, which I think those roles are bad because they're potentially benchmarks in companies when they shouldn't be, I think people need to look and say like, all right, this person's not good at relationships. We should not have them in that role, no matter how bad that they potentially want it, unless you want to do a proving ground and they're able to prove themselves.
Sure. Our second favorite account manager submits a question to us. It's a good one.
What do we got?
In a situation, a client really wants something and the team recommends against it, and the account manager is the middleman. How would you recommend handling that situation so you, the account manager, come out looking good to both? That's a great question.
So, all right, I'm just reading over this again because now it's popular. The client really wants something and the team recommends against it, and the AM is the middleman. How would you recommend handling the situation? And the AM comes out looking good to both. I think it's you as the account manager need to either A, persuade your team to go the client's direction, B, persuade the client to go in your team's direction, or C, find some type of compromise that's in between. This is a great example of what it takes to be a great account manager. You need to move them in some type of direction, persuade the hell out of them, present, do whatever you need to do to get buy-in from either party or both parties.
Well, first I would say your team, okay, you don't support this idea. What idea do you support? Make sure that you get that feedback from the team, because you don't want to let your team just say, no, that's not a good idea. Well, why? Why not? What is better? What's a better route? And then the account manager needs to be able to say, all right, what are the goals of the client? It's to get here. All right, here's some alternative routes on how to get here. At the end, the client just cares about achieving the goal. And if you can't help that, you can easily get them to change a different direction if you've got their goal in mind and you're like, all right, no, this is the best way to get to your goal, the most efficient way, and this is how we think, and present it. Sometimes the client's just going to say, no, I want this done. Mm-hmm. And if they do, then you have to say, all right, we'll do it. It's your money. And, we gave you our best expert recommendation, and if you need this done and you want it done, okay, we're doing it.
or diligently dig in with the team's data and say like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is why. I think there's that sales component, that upsell, that likability, that persuasion that's integral to this role, where you need to be able to move them. But you're absolutely, there's some times where they're just, no, I like purple, and I think everything should be purple. You're like, all right, cool, then we'll move forward in that direction.
Yep. Good question,
All right.
though.
Great question. Next point is business focused. This is kind of a recurring theme that's through there. And I get my solo screen now. But business focused, where the account manager needs to continually look at like, okay, how does this affect our company as well as the client's company? Having that thought through and through everything that they do is integral, because the profitability is what is going to help pay a person's bonus, commissions, pay increases. That is revenues, the lifeblood, and the hygiene and health is going to be that profitability. So it's important that the account manager knows at all time, as well as what a client is spending. That's business minded, right? So a client is spending $200,000 a month, but they're not making $200,000 at business, which would be a total loss. Okay. All right. Well, something is obviously not working here. It might sound super simple, but it's very, very important.
An account manager's job is not to bleed the client dry. It's to grow the client so that you can get, money, a bigger chunk. So I liken it to, a bartender. An account manager is the bartender, and the client is sitting at the bar, and you need to know when to slow them down, when to get their orders in. You need to give them a free beer every once in a while because they're a good customer. Their tolerance. All these things about a client. Like that's the account manager's job, is to be that person, that concierge that guides them. Using this great tool set of all the tools that we have to build business. So.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I think the last one, if there's any others that you'd like to add, I'm open to it, is you got to have a thick skin. You got to be willing to take the punches and realize that sometimes you may be the smartest person in that room as you coordinate everything, have your eye on the prize, but this could also be a thankless position at times, and just be willing to take some of the pain that comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have thick skin. People are going to say some nasty shit, and you got to just be like, all right, but let's figure out how to solve this problem for you. It's always, I talk about sunk cost a lot when we get into issues, because a client will be like, this is breaking, this is down. And then if their focus is on whose fault is it, I'm like, look, we'll get to that. Right now, it's all about how do we solve now. I want all resources worried about fixing now, before we're worried about whose fault, who's to blame, who said what, like all that stuff. Clients will say the nastiest shit in an emergency, and you can't take it personal. And if the account manager takes that personally, that's going to devolve really quick. You're going to hold on to that. You're going to hold a grudge with that client. Like
sure.
A whole bunch of bad things come from that. The second you take something personal. If you don't take it personal, then you're just like, all right, I understand you're upset, but I'm working on this. I'm trying to solve your problem. That's what I'm focused on. That's
right. And realizing that you have the ability to make things mean something, right? So when it comes in, for instance, like, oh, that's terrible work, or we hate that, or something, that doesn't mean anything about you. It's like, all right, cool. You're just a steward. Like, how can you continually move this ball forward in the relationship? How can you fix that problem? And it's in realizing that as an account manager, it's your job to make the client you're working with look like a rock star, seem like the smartest person in the room, make their job easier. It's also at the same time as your team to make sure that they're doing, the best work that they possibly can, and realize that sometimes you're not going to get credit for that. And it's tough, right? Because it's going all over these places. But at the end of the day, if you have that account and you're upselling it, you're one of the biggest heroes in that relationship.
Well, I look at it as like
for yourself, though, right? Like it's not always going to be a pat on the back.
No, if your team gets praise, if the production team gets praise, then you have to accept that by proxy. That they're saying that about you as well. You're you're a part of that team because you helped that team produce that result. If the client, if like internally the client's like, hey, this client's, re-signing for something new, and this is, they're up and growing the account by 30%, that's on you. But somebody might not call you out as the account manager and say, good job account managing. But those victories are also part of yours as well. And the thick
also
skin,
the length that you've kept that account, like I think that is a huge badge. Like I've had this account for X years and I've grown it. Like that's how an account manager should really measure themselves.
Right.
All right, ready to get into project managers?
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. Number one, I think the most important trait of a project manager, and this is how they need to view themselves, is a problem solver. So the guy I mentioned earlier, not a problem solver. He was a time tracker, time taker, task manager. A problem solver is somebody that when they get the issue, they actually take every possible step to solve that problem. And that makes it easier for the team as well as the entire project. So, I mean, we can go with tons of examples here, right? So let's say that the client has some scope creep and they want to change something. We can put in a change order here, or there's these other options that we can provide. Or as Dave mentioned earlier, or as Brandon and Dave mentioned earlier, with the team wants to move forward with their plan. The client has theirs. Well, that would probably be a bad project manager unless they're offering those other ideas or those other concessions to be able to move that forward. That is a sign of a great project manager, and that's why I wanted to start with that one.
I mean, that's at the core of what they need to do. And so I guess one of my biggest pet peeves with project management is when all they do is bring the problem to you.
Well, that's
I'm like,
a solver. That's definitely not a solver.
Right. So it's like, okay, I understand that you framed the problem. Now, where is the idea to solve it?
Yeah.
And if they're doing that, then that's frustration and so the project manager has to be like, all right, hey, this is changing. We need to also change this and this. And then if that sounds like a good plan and we can execute, then hey, account managers, I need you to go tell your clients and we need to change expectations. I mean, a project manager to me is like the master of expectations, and their job is to be in front of every issue and resetting expectations and then providing those new expectations for everyone so that everyone's in the loop. And I will say that 99% of the time, clients will not be upset if you change their deadline, timeline, whatever, as long as you give them, reset their expectations ahead of time, far enough out. It's the project. Yes.
Keyword.
But it's the project managers that wait to the last second that go, oh shit, this is due tomorrow. Wait, hey, client, we're not going to be able to make that. Even though I knew about it for the last 2 weeks, I'm just now telling you because, the deadline just reminded me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a terrible project manager. And the account manager is going to be furious at that project manager because they're going to make them look like shit.
Yep.
So
I agree. I think it brings up the next point, which is another trait of a great project manager is skeptical. They need to be skeptical that they're not going to be able to hit that timeline. They need to be forward thinking in offering that information to the client as well as their team. Continually skeptical. This doesn't mean negative, unenthusiastic, unhopeful. This just means, okay, I want to challenge the time that my team just gave me. I want to challenge the cost. Let's just have a conversation about this and continually look at that through skepticism or a lens of skepticism.
Sure. When you get quotes, and if you want to take that, on face value, then good luck project managing, because you better build in padding, you better build in wiggle room and mistake time, and everyone that says that it should take me 5 hours, that's the ideal world. 5 hours,
perfect scenario. That's the word I use.
Yeah.
Okay? Are we dealing with a perfect scenario here? Okay, well, let's deal with reality. Let's add in 20% of spontaneity. Another 3% for whatever.
Yeah, and if you don't have those, those ideas in place, then you're going to get screwed. And projects not necessarily fail, but just feel painful. And you don't want a painful project. So.
No, because morale, cost. I mean, a lot of things are going to be, taken there. The next point I have is one we mentioned before. It's being an excellent communicator. I think on the project management side, It's all the other things that we mentioned based on great communicating, but I think it also is in the deliverability of them. This is a role that people can get exhausted in, and I think they need to communicate that, right? Because when they're brain fatigued and they're not getting the internal workings, especially when it comes to account managers, so they can get the communications over to their client, things break down in a bad way.
Yeah. I mean, what was the one word point for this? What would you say this is?
Excellent communicator.
All right. It's I think it reminds me of like the scene in Men in Black where they have that alien that's like an octopus that has like is the switchboard operator, or maybe I'm thinking of some other movie, but
I think that's kind of
yeah, that's the project manager right there in my head. They're like, all right, you got this, you need this, I need to, constantly keeping everyone in touch. And if that breaks down, the whole thing breaks down. And if you're sending out, vague messages or not being clear, and so people are going to get frustrated, not know what to do, and can't do their job. We in our values have clarity as one of our core values. And I think this ties into project management really well, because project managers that can't communicate that clear message to any party, internal, external, it's going to just grind the gears again, and that's bad. If you have a ton of grinding gears all over your organization, you're not going to get into gear and take off.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think another trait is knowing that they can't do everything, right? So I've dealt with the project managers that think they can do everything. So that is just created complete nightmares, and knowing, and also in that knowing that they can't do everything is understanding the capacity and limitations of what can be done by their team, as well as on the client side, looking at if there's any type of history or pattern and working that into, a future project as they begin to build out that plan. Timelines too. So being able to understand time, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but at one time I realized we were losing tons of money on accounts when we were doing fixed bid projects. So anytime I got bids from the team, I would put a multiplier. It was either 2.3 or 3.2. I can't remember what it was. One of those. It's been a while. But that essentially that's how wrong they were in that perfect scenario that we gave. So understanding, capacity limitations and knowing that they can't do everything, those are very essential, are integral to project management.
Yeah, and you should have people on your team that are specialized in doing those things. Don't try to replace resources you already have. And you might think, oh, I'm going to save this. I'm going to go ahead and do this for him. Sometimes you end up spending more time. Just get it to the person that's best suited to do this. Mm-hmm. Then there's also the other side that is sometimes if this resource is completely overwhelmed and as a project manager, you need to get something done. Well, send it to the not ideal one that might take longer. You can work with the account manager to discount the time. But if that's an underutilized resource over there, know that you have that in your pocket and you know when to use it. When you can sometimes taking twice as much time is okay as long as you still reach the deadline and you have an underutilized resource. So it's the understanding that is critical for a project manager.
Yeah, and that brings up the next point where you have to be inspiring, enthusiastic. You have to be able to motivate and inspire your team so you can create buy-in. And that also works on the account management side. You have to inspire them too, that this is the best way to move forward. If you're on the client call, you have to be able to inspire them. If you're not enthusiastic and you're your way through it, it's just going to be a shitty project. It's going to be a shitty relationship, and it's going to just destroy whatever positive momentum you have.
Well, attitude is contagious. So if your project manager on a call, if you're talking to your team and trying to figure out what they're working on, and you're like, your team doesn't want to work on it then.
Yep.
Whatever you present is what your team's going to accept. And you need your team excited and motivated. There's times when I've heard people kind of badmouth a client, and I'm like, whoa, you can't stop doing that. Handle that in private, because your team hears that. And now when the tasks come in, they're going to be like, oh, that shitty client's emailing in. No, you can't have that. And if that's the case, we need to fire the client. We don't want to we don't want to work with clients that we despise or we don't
Right.
like working. So it's either, you can criticize a client and that's fine, but don't do that in front of your team. And, be that wall. I mean, that's probably what the primary project manager's job is to be a wall to protect the workers from, criticism or abuse, or, they've got to be that kind of like shield so that, stuff doesn't get by that shouldn't.
That reminds me though, with the griping. I think it's in Save It Private Ryan when they say gripes go up, they don't go down, right? So the privates can gripe up, but the leadership cannot gripe down.
Right. Yeah, griping down is terrible.
I agree. All right, the similar one to the account management side is whole picture thinking. So project manager also has to know, the whole picture. And maybe some I didn't mention in here, maybe I mentioned at the top, is both of these functions, the account management and the project manager, need to understand the importance of the role of each role, right? When they have that handshake service level agreement between both departments, that can be very effective. It's like, all right, I know that you're responsible for this, I'm responsible for this, and that's how we live in harmony. But having that shared concept of what the whole picture looks like and communicating back and forth between those departments creates a solid relationship.
I think it's essential. And the larger goal, so the project manager needs to know what's high priority, what's low priority, what's something that could get shifted, what's essential, what's not essential. And that, if they don't have that, then, they're just going to treat it like an assembly line. And when one part doesn't go smooth, then the whole thing breaks down, and that can't happen. A project manager needs to be able to like swap a part out, swap this in. All right. Or let's say a resource gets tied up or goes on vacation or gets sick or
hit by a bus.
Yeah. Then the project manager, instead of panic, just goes, okay, well, all right, we can't work on this right now. So we're going to have to double down on the UI design or the design because the developer's out, and we're going to focus on that. And the client's going to have this thing, ready to see. And, and to be able to swap that out and just still make progress. The big key is you can't just have a project that stops because something happened. If that becomes unavailable or you run into an issue there, you have to sit there and know, big picture, what else can we work on to make progress? Because there's no point in waiting 3 months to get to a design piece when you could just design it right now. What's the difference? So knowing that you can be able to swap things in and out and keep attacking it and make progress, that's key.
I agree. And then when things can become grinding, right, as a project manager in any role. So I've seen some bad project managers flip out. So cool under pressure.
Yeah.
When you have somebody that approaches their work where they're unflappable and they just stay cool, calm, and cavalier through all of it, it makes everything smoother. They need to be that rock in the relationship so they can protect the team, so they can protect the relationship with the client. Clients are going to freak out over some things. You're going to have your own team members freak out over some things. Right. Account managers may freak out, but if you can remain that rock where you're cool under pressure, things go a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, 100%. It's the same with the account. You got to have thick skin and for project management, because your team's going to freak out and say stuff, and you got to let it. It's not personal. Again, can't take it personal. It's just business. Yep. Work is stressful.
All right.
That's part of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's hand in hand.
And then you got to be a team builder. If you're going to be a good account manager, you have to be a team builder. And team building is more than just saying, hey, this person is going to be right for this role. It's building those people up once they're in that role. And it's also looking at, where people aren't good. Okay, but they might be good somewhere else. So building teams, figuring out how people work together and what they don't do well together is integral.
So I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if that's the project manager's job. I feel like project management, they should definitely know who's good at what and the skill set. They need to be invested in the teams to know how to best get things accomplished. But in terms of building up the team, I don't know if I agree with that.
Who else would do it?
Well, a project manager should be somebody different than the team manager, right? The team manager or the team lead should be the one that's developing the team and building the team, because they understand what the team does. They are closer to the work. Usually a team lead is somebody that used to be doing the work. And the project manager.
So, for instance, like a project manager has to put together that entire team. Like that's how I always the work that we always did. There was that person was the quarterback on the production side.
If you mean they get to select from the existing resources they know, and they say, "Hey, I need this person, that person, that to work on this project," then I agree with you. But when I hear team building, I'm like, that's hiring. That's developing their skill set.
That's it. I'd call that that's recruiting, and that's like a whole different thing. But yeah, team building is, and also the resources, the team members you have on your team, you have to continually build them up. You have to move them around on your project. It's your project. You want it to be successful.
And on that point, to determine what makes a great project manager, which I should have said at the beginning of the project management section, that I think most project managers are worthless, like flat out worthless. Good project managers are worth their weight in gold. That's how big the gap is between most project managers and the good ones, because there's not a lot of just average project managers. They're either worthless or awesome. So, because an example of a bad project manager is on every time they get a project, the team that they want to pick is the most senior developer, the most senior designer. Like, I need all the best people on my project. Well, no shit, because you just want to succeed without work. The good project manager says, "Hey, on this project, I'm going to use that entry-level guy. We're going to maximize his value because he can work on this, and I need this intermediate level person because it's okay if we take a little extra time on this piece. And then I just need a little slice of the senior guy so that we can knock this and polish it off." And I just completed a very efficient project, and we made more profit than we should have. That is a good project manager. There's tons of times where I've been in meetings where, sure, all you want is our best people. Yeah, I get it. That's easy. That's the easy response. So,
yeah. And I get it from a resource standpoint. I think that's definitely true. If I had to look at bad project managers, the ones that are the most frustrating, I think it's the one that bothers me the most is just poor communication. I just don't understand like that. I mean, that's so important to what you do, but you haven't told anybody how it has to get done, or you just will throw out like a project plan and just expect it to happen. It's like, what is that? Like, you have to move people into getting the stuff done. Even with other companies where there's been software rollouts, and they're like, all right, this is the project manager. Carl's going to get on there. And it's like, okay, do we got this done? And this is like, well, Carl, like, how do we do that? It's like, well, I just sent you the support document. Carl doesn't check in. Carl, the next week, nothing got done on the support document. It's like, dude, Carl, go fuck yourself, man. Like, how do you even have a job? So I get what you're saying. I'm not too. I haven't been too involved on that side, but yeah, I have a very, very tender spot for poor account managers, because I just don't understand that's a title that they should just be given out lightly. It should be really earned.
I've got a great client story that goes exactly with what you just said. And we had this client, which great client, loved working, and the CEO got ousted. And this replacement guy comes in, and I'm on this meeting with him, and he's talking about how he wants this platform to be more, I can't remember what he was looking for, more social or something like that. And I'm like, all right, everybody's in agreement. Yeah, we got to be more social with this stuff and more integrated. And I'm like, okay, so how do we do that? And then he got pissed, and he was like, David, don't you think our platform needs to be more social? And I was like, yes. How do we do it? And he's like, I just don't know if I can work with it. I was like, he had zero fucking clue of how to get from point A to point B, but he just, like your, like typical asshole MBA guy that comes in, he's just like, shouldn't we be more?
I'm gonna will this into existence.
Yeah, like he just thinks, okay, go off and make it happen. I don't really want to be involved in any aspect of it or have any clue how to do it. And I just laughed my ass off. We got off that call and I was like, we might not be working with this client anymore because this new CEO. Now, that CEO ended up getting ousted after that, and the original one got put back in. So it was like really interesting scenario. But I hate the people that just say, like, I need you to go make something happen. And,
yeah,
disappear.
And having that in a project manager is terrible. Like that
Right.
just to me doesn't
Like going to your team
will
is just saying,
into existence. Like
Right.
you have to. There's so many other nuances and variables that come into play to create great work.
Yeah, what's the plan? Like you can't just be like, hey, make me a mobile app that's like Facebook. I'll come back in 6 months and see how you're doing.
Yep.
Doesn't work.
Oh, and that's another great point when you have clashes where it's just like, well, this is our project manager working on the client side, and we're going to work with your project manager. And nothing seems to flesh because they have the certain way that they're going to do things. You have the way that you're going to do things. You have this poor account manager that's in between, like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
So,
I mean, in those cases, you might not even need an account manager because, if they're providing their own project manager and they're involved, then you need to look at like, how do we streamline? We don't need all these pieces if they're going to be providing that and if they're decent. I would say luckily most of the project managers we've worked with on the client side have been really good.
Yeah. I've worked with a ton of great ones. I've worked with a handful of bad ones though. But still some scar tissue there. And a lot of these points, it brings up essentially the bad one, which is not the bad one. I'm sorry. One of the most integral is the profitability. So when the account manager understands the profitability for their team, the timelines, everything involved, as well as the client side, based on the solutions that are being proposed, and back to those timelines again. There are instances where if a site does not go live by a specific date or a campaign, there is tons of money that is lost by that initiative not taking place. So having that, back to the account manager side, business-minded viewpoint of the profitability, how does this company make money? How do they lose money is an integral. And also the last point.
Well, one of the last points I want to make is I
want to come up with another point after your point then.
Okay. But account management is all about the what, and project management is all about the how, right? The account manager needs to know about other things that people are doing, like what new features are out there, new reporting tools, new technology, and then they need to get the client hype about that. The project manager needs to know about how do we get this shit done? What's the new technology stack that can make this website faster? What's the new SEO, or marketing tool set that's going to produce more results? And the project manager needs to understand the how to get things done and what they do more so than the account manager. Because the account manager doesn't need to know how things get done. They just need to know what gets done. What is the end result for the client? And then on the project manager side, so I think for aspiring project managers out there, you need to know about what you're project managing. So if you're going to be project managing developers, you better know a little code, or at least read up on stuff that they're talking about. You have to be able to speak to them on their level and understand on the technology level. And if you don't get on that level, you're going to not be a good project manager. So I think ex-coders that decide that they want to move into project management make great project managers for developers, as long as they have those communication skills that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think, and so maybe this is my sub point to your point, but the last point nonetheless is you have to have the technical prowess to communicate, right, with your internal team. Because if let's say that you're on the civil engineering side and you're going to be a project manager and you've been developing websites for the last 10 years, you're not going to speak to everybody in that same language, and you're not going to be able to hit your timelines, not effectively anyway, because you're probably going to have people quit. So those technical capabilities are a must, depending on that work that you're delivering. You don't have to be the best at that work. I think, in fact, that works to your favor, because if you're not the best, you're not going to ego chase. So it's somebody like, no, that lady is 10 times better than I am at that. Okay, I want her on my team.
Well, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, like when you're going to be working with so and so on this project, they're like, oh, I hate working with that project manager, like
Yeah.
all the time. So, yeah, a great discussion. I mean, project management versus account management is key, and it's that connection of the client to the getting work done, that handoff and that communication. And when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, man, it's grinding.
Yeah, and these two roles have to work together. That's the irony of the title account management versus project management, because like I said before, understanding what each role does is going to pay dividends throughout. And when these two work together, the type of work that they can get done and the length of accounts and the profitability that are involved are huge. It's insane. But like you said, on that flip side, when one of them is weak or they do not get along, it is painful for all teams involved. You're going to see client turnover. You're going to see team turnover. And it's going to make your life hell if you're over them in any way or form, because all you're going to do is hear about the bitching and complaining and whining that occurs on both sides where that infighting lives.
Yep, 100%.
All right. I think this is another good episode here on August 5th, 2020, year of our Lord. In some closing thoughts here. Anybody, if you like this episode, no matter what time you've heard it, go ahead and reach out to me, Jon@digitalmastermind.com. Visit the website, digitalmastermind.com. If you could review us, if you're listening to this on iTunes or wherever you are, go ahead and throw a comment, like, share, do whatever you want to do with it. Trash it. Doesn't matter to me. Just happy that, we had your attention for as long as we did. Thank you so much. Look forward to next time. All right. Thanks, y'all.